let's talk a little bit about tariff effect on inflation. So far, if you look at the chart on the left, this chart is through the end of June. We are not seeing any uptick in inflation at this point. Now, there are things that can counter inflation, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But the reality is, inflation is not increasing at this point as a result of tariffs. We're not done with the tariffs. We don't know where this is all going to end up. But so far, it's been a non-factor, even though if you listen to the news, you would think it would be. On the right side, what we did is just show you the breakdown of how different sectors of the economy weigh in on inflation. And as you can see, shelter is the largest, okay? And shelter is not really being impacted by tariffs. So if you think tariffs are going to be a big weight in overall growth of the economy or inflation, probably not, because the biggest sectors are not going to get impacted by it. Here we want to talk about the effective tariff rate and what is that manageable, or is that going to blow our economy and markets out of the water? On the left side, we put a historical chart in here going all the way back to the 1800s, because actually, if you think about it, tariffs have not been a conversation much in the past 20, 25 years. But at one time it was, as we were building our country. And you can see all the way back to 1828, we had huge tariffs on imports into the United States. They started coming down, they kicked back up again in 1861, a little bit down again, and then kicked back up in 1890. Not a whole lot going on until 1930, right before the Depression. We started raising tariffs on imports from other countries. Since then, it's gone down and it's almost been negligible. The big note here is the reason it's been so low is primarily because of the NAFTA agreement. We made huge concessions with Mexico and Canada as far as trading on the North American continent, and that's why tariffs have been, I think, artificially low during this time period. And actually, Dan, the United States suffered a little bit from this with the impacts to the loss of jobs, manufacturing, and things like that in the United States. A lot of that started getting outsourced. We don't want to have high tariffs. We want fair trading, and I'm hoping that that's what the administration is going after. You see the dots on the right side of that left side chart, the brown dots. We were initially at a high of about 30%. That's already dropped down to half. And we believe that's going to settle in, actually be a little bit lower. When we look at the right side of the chart, this is just to give you a comparison of country exports as a percent of GDP. And why is that important? Well, if you look at the United States, our exports only represents about 11.8% of our total GDP. So what this means is that primarily the growth of the economy in the United States is contained within the United States. It's our own buying and selling to each other. Counter that with what's going on in Germany. Germany has to sell a lot overseas to be able to just sustain their internal growth rate. So they're very dependent on other countries. In my opinion, that's not necessarily a good place to be at, especially when there's times of volatility and trade wars that can go on. Almost half of their GDP is dependent on other countries buying their products. You can also see in here, the final point to this chart is Canada and Mexico. Significant portions of their economy and their growth is dependent on exports. The take, I think, on what's the impact for tariffs on the United States, not as bad as other countries around the world.
Yeah, I think you're right. But looking at this chart, I was just thinking about something, Rocky. I wonder what would happen if you overlaid income tax on this tariffs. So as tariffs were going down, what do you think was going on with our income tax? It was going up because at one point we had what, 2% tax?
Right.
And in the beginning, the young country was screaming over that. And since then, the tariffs have gone down, which means other countries paying us has gone down, and our income tax has gone up, which means what? There's more money out of our pocket paying
Right.
for things than other countries paying for it.
Right.
So that's an interesting, I would love to get a chart and overlay them, because I think most people would be like, you know what, maybe tariffs aren't so bad.
Yeah. Well, fair trade is what I think is ultimately what we're going after.
Well, I don't know. I'd
And-
like to have lower taxes, Rock.
Yep.